Stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon and you expect horizontal layers of ancient red sandstone. The patient record of 2 billion years. At river mile 178, the rules shatter. A black cinder cone called Vulcan's throne sits perched directly on the rim. Below it, frozen waterfalls of jet black basalt coat the sheer canyon walls, rock that formed not over epochs, but in days, when the earth tore open and bled fire directly into the deepest gorge in North America. This basalt is evidence left at a crime scene. The black lava is approximately 73,000 years old. The red walls it clings to are 300 million years old. You're looking at a timeline collision. Ancient patient geology interrupted by recent volcanic violence. The canyon formed slowly over roughly 6 million years, but the volcanism that attacked it occurred repeatedly during the final 725,000 years of that process, not after. The Grand Canyon is not a monument to slow erosion. It's a battlefield. The basalt cascading down those red walls is forensic evidence. Basalt forms when the Earth's mantle breaches the surface and pours molten rock at roughly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't belong in a canyon carved by water, unless that water was attacked. Vulcan's throne is part of the Uinkaret Volcanic Field, a cluster of at least 213 volcanic vents concentrated in the western Grand Canyon region. These weren't explosive stratovolcanoes like Mount St. Helens. They were effusive eruptions pouring high-volume lava flows with low viscosity that traveled miles. When that lava reached the canyon rim, it poured over the edge in molten rivers, cascading down tributary canyons and directly into the Colorado River channel. When 2,000-degree basaltic lava contacts flowing water, the water flash boils into steam. The lava cools into solid rock. Then the next flow arrives, stacking on top. The canyon's V-shape concentrated the lava like a mold. Each successive flow built higher. What resulted were accidental dams, volcanic barricades ranging from 200 feet to over 2,300 feet in height at their tallest. These structures accomplished what no upstream landslide ever could. They completely choked off one of the most powerful rivers in the American West. The Uinkaret Volcanic Field produced its dam-forming flows over a roughly 625,000-year window, from approximately 725,000 to 100,000 years ago. The flows were predominantly basaltic, similar in character to modern Hawaiian eruptions, and their low viscosity allowed them to travel fast and far before reaching the canyon floor. When molten basalt contacts water, the interface is a war zone. The river boils instantly, creating steam explosions and pillow basalt formations where the outer lava skin freezes on contact while the interior remains molten. The river cannot boil away the incoming volume. The lava wins. The canyon's geometry did the rest. The narrow inner gorge concentrated the flows, forcing them to stack vertically. Multiple vents contributed to single dam structures over weeks to years of episodic eruptions. The result was a solid wall of black basalt blocking the Colorado River, a river that drains 246,000 square miles of the western United States. At least 13 distinct lava dam events have been identified through radiometric dating and stratigraphic analysis. Each was a separate dam built and destroyed across a 625,000-year span. Nature ran the same experiment 13 times, and the outcome was identical every time. The dam formed, the river stopped, and physics began the countdown to failure. The Colorado River drains 637,000 square kilometers of the American West. When a wall of basalt blocks that river completely, the water doesn't disappear. It backs up. The rate depends on season and snowmelt, but the outcome is inevitable. The canyon corridor transforms into an inland sea. Pre-dam historical peak flows on the Colorado reached approximately 8,500 cubic meters per second during major flood events. All of that water, carrying 85 to 90 million tons of sediment per year, suddenly had nowhere to go. Within years, the violent river corridor became still water. Within decades, the lake reached its maximum extent, over 200 miles upstream, stretching into modern-day Utah. The geological evidence is still there. Fine-grained lake sediments sit upstream of dam remnant locations. Delta deposits mark where tributary canyons entered the lake. Wave-cut notches and beach terraces record shoreline elevations. The sediment deposition patterns shift from coarse river deposits to fine lake bottom muds, the signature of still water replacing flowing water. The river's famous sediment load dropped out of suspension and began filling the lake from the bottom up. The Colorado River, defined by its erosive power, became a deposition zone. The flowing water that carved the canyon became still water that buried it. While it was dead, hydrostatic pressure at the dam base, roughly 870 pounds per square inch at the deepest structures, probed every microscopic weakness in the basalt, searching for the fracture that would end the stalemate. When the lake finally rose enough to reach the dam crest, water began spilling over. The initial flow was modest, a trickle finding the lowest point on the dam's irregular surface. That trickle immediately began eroding a notch. The notch concentrated the flow. Concentrated flow increased velocity. Increased velocity amplified erosive force. Each incremental change accelerated the next. Within years, possibly months, a modest spillway became a catastrophic waterfall. Height is the critical variable. At the tallest documented dam, the hyaloclastite structure, approximately 366 meters, water reached the plunge pool at speeds sufficient to generate cavitation. Vapor bubbles forming and collapsing violently in low-pressure zones, each collapse releasing a microscopic shockwave capable of eroding even dense basalt. Multiply that by billions of events per second, and cavitation becomes a relentless jackhammer. Simultaneously, the water carried abrasive sediment, the same sand and silt the river transported before the dam formed, grinding away rock through sheer abrasion. The plunge pool deepened. As it deepened, it undercut the dam base, removing structural support from the columns of basalt above. Basalt is extraordinarily strong in compression, over 200 megapascals, but weak in tension, with tensile strength only 10 to 20 megapascals. The columnar jointing formed during cooling created vertical fracture planes running through the entire structure. Once the base was undercut, those columns became unsupported cantilevers, subjected to bending forces they were never built to resist. Individual columns cracked, then entire sections sheared off simultaneously. Modern engineered dams include spillways, flexible joints, and controlled failure modes. The basalt dams had none of this. They were accidental structures with no reinforcement and no drainage. Strong enough to hold back an inland sea for thousands of years, they had no mechanism to survive the forces they created once overtopping began. Once undercutting removed enough support and cantilever stresses exceeded basalt's tensile strength, the failure transitioned from incremental to catastrophic. Large sections, millions of tons of solid basalt, shattered simultaneously. Once a breach widened past a critical threshold, the impounded lake began draining through the gap faster than erosion could naturally widen it. At that point, hydraulic forces took over. Peer-reviewed modeling of the hyaloclastite dam failure, the largest confirmed event, estimates peak discharge between 230,000 and 530,000 cubic meters per second. The largest historically recorded flow on the Colorado River was approximately 8,500 cubic meters per second. This represents a discharge roughly 25 to 60 times greater than any natural flow the river has produced in recorded history. A wall of water moving at freeway speeds, carrying enough force to move house-sized basalt boulders downstream like gravel. Modern dam failures provide the template. The Teton Dam in Idaho failed in 1976, progressing from first leak to complete structural collapse in 6 hours. The St. Francis Dam in California failed in 1928, releasing 12 billion gallons in minutes and killing over 400 people. Those were engineered structures with steel reinforcement. The basalt dams were geological accidents with pre-existing fracture planes and no capacity for controlled failure. The floodwaters scoured. Normal river erosion is inefficient. Water flows down a channel, gradually abrading the bed, with most energy dissipated as friction. Megaflood erosion is orders of magnitude more efficient. Turbulent flow generates shear forces that tear at rock. Boulders entrained in the flow become battering rams, impacting bedrock at velocities sufficient to fracture and pulverize. The canyon walls bear the scars, boulder deposits far above the normal river level, too large to be moved by any recorded flow. Sedimentary deposits that accumulated over decades during the lake phase were stripped away in days. The most important fact is the repetition. At least 13 distinct lava dam events spanning 725,000 to 100,000 years ago. 13 separate cycles of eruption, damming, lake formation, and catastrophic failure. The repetition proves this wasn't geological accident but system behavior. Deterministic physics playing out when active volcanism occupies the same landscape as a major river, confined in a steep canyon. Each cycle followed identical mechanics. Lava poured into the canyon, basalt dams formed. The Colorado backed up into an inland sea. Hydrostatic pressure probed for weakness. Overtopping began. Waterfalls undercut the structure, the dam failed catastrophically, megafloods scoured the canyon, then the system reset and the river resumed normal flow until the next eruption triggered the sequence again. The inter-event periods varied from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years. The outcome never changed. During lake phases, downcutting ceased entirely. During dam break floods, erosion accelerated to rates thousands of times above baseline. The canyon's depth is the net result of these competing forces integrated over deep time. Even if dam break events represented only a tiny fraction of total elapsed time, the disproportionate energy released during those failures accomplished an outsized share of the canyon's total erosive work. For 2 centuries, uniformitarianism dominated geology, the principle that present processes operating at present rates explain all past features. 13 megafloods in 625,000 years prove the baseline was repeatedly overwhelmed by violent pulses. The present is a key to the past. It's an incomplete key. The past also contained forces no longer active and intensities the present cannot replicate. Stand at the Grand Canyon's rim and what you see is serenity. Red layers, blue sky, a thin ribbon of river far below. 2 billion years of patient rock, 6 million years of slow carving. That's the story most people carry home. The black basalt at Vulcan's throne, 73,000 years old, clinging to walls that are 300 million years old, tells a different story. The Colorado River fought its way through 13 separate walls of solid magma, each up to 2,300 feet tall at their maximum. It survived being choked into a 200-mile inland sea 13 times. It endured 13 catastrophic dam break floods that discharged at their peak more than 50 times the largest flood ever recorded on that river. The canyon is the accumulated scar tissue of a 625,000-year war between the heat of the Earth's mantle and the gravity of a continental river. The river won every battle. Every victory came through violence, not patience.